Hi everyone, Michael Lee Bryan here from the Oraculos School of Astrology, and today we're going to dive into part 2 of our series on the natal chart of Jeffrey Epstein. Our part 1 was quite interesting because I had a plan of how I wanted to approach it, and it just turned into its own thing, and I'm pretty sure part 2 is going to be the same. So today we're going to be taking a look at some of the relationships that underpins Jeffrey Epstein's life, not just his relationship with his parents, but also his intimate romantic relationships, and see how all of these relationships give us further insight into the person who he ultimately became. As always, the delineations that I'm deriving for Jeffrey Epstein's chart have been completely derived from my book, The New Western Medical Astrology: Pathways Towards the Cosmos Indwelling, because in the appendix of this book, I have delineations and descriptions for all 78 of the planetary pairs that exist within astrology. So if you want to have a means of following along these videos and also understanding my interpretation of the concrete manifestations of the various planetary pairs, then do make sure to grab yourself a copy of my book today. Now, without further ado, let us dive into our part 2 in our series on Jeffrey Epstein. And as always, if you love what's occurring here on the Oraculos podcast, please take 2 seconds to go down below and subscribe to the Oraculos podcast and hit the notification bell so that you can receive notifications of when we come out with new episodes each and every week. Do enjoy. All right, everyone. So now that we've finished taking a look at Jeffrey Epstein's soul and psyche, essentially, who he is as a person, now let's go and take a look at some of the dynamics that underpin his family life. Now, we know that within traditional astrology, the 4th house is the house of the father and the family. And the only reason why in modern astrology we think that it's the house of the mother and the family is because of one astrologer in the 1980s who was hell-bent on teaching astrology in a weekend. And so as a result of that, she came up with what is known as the 12-letter astrological alphabet. And this 12-letter astrological alphabet states that Aries is equal to the 1st house, and so is Mars. Venus is equal to the 2nd house, and so is Taurus. Gemini is equal to the 3rd house, and so is Mercury. And the moon is equal to the 4th house, and so is Cancer. This is a modern astrological invention that's no older than 40 years old, if at that. And it has led us into a world of chaos and confusion ever since. The assignment of the definitions of the houses comes from an understanding that is rooted within the heart of traditional astrology, and it's not meant to be screwed with, ultimately. The 1st house corresponds with Saturn, and it corresponds with Saturn because the Chaldean order of the planets is Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Sun, Venus, Mercury, and the Moon. And so when we apply this Chaldean order to the 12 houses, then we end up Saturn corresponding with the 1st house, Jupiter corresponding with the 2nd house, Mars corresponding with the 3rd house, and the Sun corresponding with the 4th house. That is where the houses derive their meanings from. It doesn't derive their meanings from our emotions or what we think should be right. It derives its meaning from a symmetry that exists within nature. And that symmetry, as far as the planets are concerned, is called the Chaldean order. Saturn corresponds with the 1st house because the 1st house is where the human soul becomes locked into and entrapped within the physicality of the physical body. In the same way that Saturn represents the earth element, the 1st house represents the earth element that is the physical body. Jupiter corresponds with the 2nd house because in the same way as Jupiter corresponds with abundance, the 2nd house is corresponding with abundance, and the 2nd house is also corresponding with the mother's breast milk that supports the baby that is born into its physical body. The 3rd house corresponds with Mars because Mars is the universal significator of our brothers, our brethren, and our blood relatives, in just the same way as the 3rd house is representing our brothers and our blood relatives. Mars is also a planet that corresponds with pilgrimages. And as a result of that, the 3rd house is also corresponding not just with our brothers and our blood relatives, but also with our short journeys. It has nothing to do with Mercury, and it has nothing to do with Gemini. And finally, the fourth house is corresponding with the sun, because the fourth house is the house of the father in much the same way as the sun is the universal significator of the father within all of our birth chart. It has nothing to do with the moon. It has nothing to do with Cancer. It definitely has not even one iota to do with anybody's mother in this lifetime or the life to come. All of these things were discussed in my first book, Mastering Traditional Astrology, A Depth of Beginning in the Celestial Art, which I'm very proud to say is becoming an astrological classic. This book, more than any other book, definitely is selling quite rapidly. And I love that for this. And I love that so many of you have this on your bookshelf. And for those of you who don't know what the actual interiority of this book looks like, the actual version of this book, this is what the inside of the book looks like. It says, the beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord, for nature is also rooted in God. So I do love this book, but everything that I'm saying is completely in this book, Mastering Traditional Astrology, and I sincerely hope that you purchase yourself a copy. Now, we're going to take a look at this individual's familial situation within this lifetime. The first thing that we do within traditional astrology when it comes to the assessment of the houses is we assess the planets that are terrestrially located within those houses. Because from a traditional perspective, our understanding is that determination by location is immediate. This comes to us from the 17th century astrologer Jean-Baptiste Morin de Villefranche. And Jean-Baptiste said to us that a planet's location within a house is going to be more impactful on the affairs of that house, especially if the ruler of that house is located elsewhere. Therefore, determination by location is immediate. And here we see Jupiter located within the fourth house. Now, the question actually becomes, what does that mean? Having Jupiter in the fourth house from a universal perspective can indicate that he comes from a family of wealth, and it can indicate that he comes from a family of means, a family that has many connections within the world at large, and a family that is fundamentally rooted within this sense of deep wealth, whether that is wealth within his generation or whether that is wealth that has been passed down generationally. These can be some of the things that we derive from simply having Jupiter as the universal significator of wealth and abundance, as well as ancestral wealth located within the fourth house. But that is only one part of things. That is Jupiter's universal signification. We also have to take into consideration the specific signification of this Jupiter. Within this chart, we see that Jupiter is the specific ruler of his 12th house. The 12th house is, as far as I'm concerned, one of the cosmic toilet bowls of the universe. I wrote that in my first book, Mastering Traditional Astrology, and then people who were reviewing it, one person who was reviewing it was like, oh my God, that's such crude language. Why would you put that in a book? And so I took it out because I was young, I was dumb, I was self-publishing, and I was impressionable. And so I took it out. But ultimately, that is how I feel about the 12th house. The 12th house is one of the cosmic toilet bowls of the universe. It's some place that we don't like to visit. And it's also some place that is full of things that we, in general, don't like to talk about. The same is true for the ruler of the 12th house and where the ruler of the 12th house is located within our natal chart. So, for example, if the ruler of my father, i.e., in this case, Venus, was located within his 12th house, then the father would be a difficult person for him to talk about in this lifetime. The father might be somebody who represents a hidden enemy for him. The father might represent silent suffering for him. The father might represent a very difficult part of his life. His family might be a topic that for him is just something he doesn't want to discuss. So that's what we would see with the Venus, or rather the ruler of the fourth house and the 12th house. However, it isn't that much different when we have the ruler of the 12th house in the fourth house, because the ruler of the house and the house itself always exist on a continuum. And there are certain houses for which that is not the case, which I'll get into. But the ruler of the house and the house itself are oftentimes on a continuum. Similar to the first house, the ruler of the first house is representing my soul and psyche in this lifetime. But similarly, The first house itself is representing my soul and psyche within this lifetime. Second house, the ruler of my second house is representing my wealth within this lifetime. But similarly, the second house itself is representing my wealth within this lifetime. Third house, the ruler of my third house is representing my siblings within this lifetime. But similarly, the third house itself is representing my siblings within this lifetime. Fourth house, the ruler of my fourth house represents my father. But the fourth house itself does not represent my father. So this is a place where we find a distinction between the ruler of the house and the actual contents of that house itself. The ruler of the fourth house will signify the father within all of our natal charts. But the fourth house itself and the content of the fourth house tend to be more descriptive of our family in general and not our father specifically. Similarly, the 10th house, the ruler of the 10th house will represent my mother, but the contents of the 10th house will not represent my mother. The content of the 10th house will represent my career. These are the distinctions that we need to know about. Truthfully, as I sit here and look at this pack of 3 books that I've already written, I don't think that I've written this specifically in any of these 3 books. But if I haven't, it is definitely going to come out in the Natal Astrology book, which is going to come out in 6 months. I just figured out what the name of that book is going to be, and that book is coming out. So for the 4th house, we go to the planets in the 4th house to represent the circumstances of the family, or we go to the ruler of the 4th house to represent the father specifically. So the Jupiter in the 4th house we've already discussed based on the universal significations of the Jupiter. I can come from a family of wealth. I can come from a family of many international connections. I can come from a family from abroad, because Jupiter in general is the universal significator of far and wide and of travels abroad. So all of these things could be relevant for the Jupiter. However, we now need to take into consideration the fact that the Jupiter is also the specific significator and the specific ruler of this gentleman's 12th house. What does that mean? That can be an indication that this topic of family for him is one that represents a source of silent suffering. This topic of family for him is one in which he feels as if he's surrounded by many hidden enemies. This topic of family for him can be one of the greatest sources of pain within his lifetime. Why have we historically always thought of the 12th house as representing one of our greatest sources of pain in any lifetime? The reason why the 12th house is thought of as representing one of the greatest sources of pain in a lifetime is because the 12th house is 8 houses away from the 5th house. The 5th house is the first house of my children, 6th house is the second house of my children, 7th house is the third house of my children, 8th house is the 4th house of my children, 9th house is the 5th house of my children, 10th house is the 6th house of my children, 7th house, 11th house is the 7th house of my children, and the 12th house is the 8th house of my children. What does the 8th house of my children represent? It represents the death of my children. And as a result of that, the ancients thought that the 12th house represented a pain that was completely indescribable, because from an ancient perspective, there was no greater suffering a person could suffer. There was no greater hidden enemy a person could have within his lifetime than that of the death or the passing away of their children before themselves. And therefore, this 12th house is representing the greatest level of suffering a person can have within this lifetime. So seeing the rule of the 12th house within the 4th house is saying to us that this topic of family, this topic of coming from a family, this topic of my specific ancestry, wealthy or not, could be a major source of suffering within the life of this native. One of the things that's interesting to me, and that became very evident to me in the writing of my 3rd book, which was The New Western Medical Astrology, was that I wanted to write about the physiological issues that people could have within a lifetime. And the book almost got published without me writing the chapter on mental health issues that people could also have within a lifetime. And as I was going through it, I was rushing towards my deadline, and something said to me, Michael, you have all of these charts of people who have various mental health conditions. whether it is bipolarism, whether it's schizophrenia, whether it's just chronic depression, whatever it is, you have all of these charts, you should dedicate some space within this book to acknowledging not just the things that go on within the machinery of that person's self, but also within the interiority of that person's self. And so that's what caused me to write the mental health section. And one of the things that was starkly obvious to me in writing the mental health section was that there was no one who had any chronic diagnosable mental health issue who did not also have some harrowing events that consistently happened within their childhood. This wasn't something that I was aware of before. It wasn't even something that I partially thought about in the depths of my subconscious mind because it just wasn't on the forefront of my medical astrology research. I was more concerned with figuring out which planet represents your gallbladder, which planet represents your pancreas, which planet represents your duodenum. That was more my orientation, but I wasn't really as concerned about mental health issues and about mental illnesses as I was about physiological illnesses. But it was quite fascinating to me that every single story that we have within this book and the hundreds of mental health charts that we've assessed and viewed over the course of the year it took to write this book all share the same theme of there being some harrowing story within the early childhood environment. And that could have been one of the things that precipitated their later mental health crisis within their lives, whether it was a chronic crisis, whether it was an acute crisis. So within this chart, we're seeing the baseline for somebody who essentially is coming from a difficult home. Now we need to go and see what else there is within this chart that stands to support this. We know that the ruler of the fourth house is going to represent the father. The universal significator of the father is going to be the sun. The specific significator of the father is going to be the ruler of the fourth house. Here we have his ruler of the fourth house as Venus at 16 degrees Pisces, 39 minutes in the second house of the native. The second house of the native is the derived 11th house of the native's father. If this is the native's first house, if I go all the way around the chart, I end up in my father's 11th house, and then this would be my father's 12th house, the third house. And what we oftentimes find when a person has the ruler of their fourth house in their natal second house is that that person can oftentimes feel as if their father had no space and no time to pay attention to them specifically within this lifetime. So here within this, we can see that maybe the father was off pursuing his own dreams and his own ambitions. And as a result of that, it may not necessarily be that he was a bad person, but it may simply be that the father didn't really have any time to settle into the shape of what it meant to be a parent to this specific individual. And as a result of that, the native may have felt very deeply unfathered within this lifetime. So that's one of the things that we're seeing by virtue of having the ruler of the fourth house in his radical second house. Now, after we do that, it is necessary for us to go and assess the aspects to this ruler of the fourth house, in much the same way as we assessed aspects to the ruler of the first house. However, within my assessment of aspects to the ruler of the fourth house, I know that the only aspects that will be indicative of the father's personality are going to be hard aspects. Soft aspects to the ruler of your fourth house will not indicate the personality of your father. The only aspects that will indicate the personality of the father are going to be hard aspects to the ruler of the fourth house or hard aspects to your sun. Those are the two sets of aspects we draw from in searching out the soul and psyche of the father. Similarly, as far as the mother is concerned, the only aspects to the ruler of the 10th house that are going to be indicative of the mother's soul and psyche and her personality are going to be hard aspects to the ruler of that 10th house or hard aspects to the moon. So here within this chart, we find that he has the Venus in the conjunction with the Mars. Similar to what we did with the ruler of the Ascendant, this Venus is not Venus for me. This Venus is L4. Venus is L4, i.e. ruler of the fourth house, or lady of the fourth house. So here we have L4 in the conjunction with Mars. When we view a person within our chart via the planet that signifies that person, that planet loses all of its intrinsic qualities, and we only view that planet as a blank canvas that takes upon itself the coloration of whatever planets are in hard aspects to it. Therefore, in my mind, I'm not viewing his father as a Venus-Mars person. I'm viewing his father as a Mars person. Father as a Mars person can indicate that the father was a very militant person, a very action-oriented, ambitious person, but also possibly a very angry person. Very often when we have Mars in hard aspect with the ruler of our fourth house, or even if we have Mars in the conjunction to the fourth house cusp itself, these things can indicate that the father was either in the military, working as a police officer, and if he wasn't in the military or working as a police officer, this can also be an indication that the father himself guided and led his house in a militaristic fashion. Now, when I said this in class on the weekend, because we did this assessment on the weekend, when I said this on the weekend, I had no idea about anything regarding his father, because one of the things that I love about myself is that I'm always woefully ignorant of the lives of celebrities. So when I say something, is not because I've done research on them, because ain't nobody got time for that. I have a school to run, I have books to write, I have a train to catch to New York at 1 o'clock today. Ain't nobody got time to be searching up no Jeffrey Epstein daddy issues. But then when I said it in class, somebody said, yes, Michael, his father was actually a person who held great office within the military. And so said, so done. He has the rule of the fourth house in conjunction with the Mars, which can speak towards the military parent, but it can also speak towards the parent who runs the household in a militaristic fashion. Now, as far as I'm concerned, if you were out in the world living your best life, as is indicated by having the rule of the father in the second house, which is the father's 11th house, how dare you come into this household and now try to be boots on the ground, military dad, when you aren't even really here to begin with in a way that actually would justify you feeling as if you have this level of dominion or this level of control or this level of power over me. So that's one of the things that we see via the ruler of the fourth house in a conjunction with the natal Mars. Now, one of the things that I'm going to say, because I'm not sure that we're going to get through all of this today, is that what we see within Jeffrey Epstein's chart via this Moon-Mars conjunction is what we also see in the chart of Jeffrey Dahmer, who also has the hard aspect of Venus-Mars. I think I just said Moon-Mars. But Jeffrey Dahmer, who also has the hard aspect of Venus-Mars within his chart. We also see this in the chart of John Wayne Gacy, who also has the hard aspect of Venus-Mars within his chart. John Wayne Gacy, who was a notorious American serial killer who killed over 30 boys and men and kept their bodies underneath his house. We also see this in the chart of P. Diddy. Is that what he's called? P. Diddy? P. Diddy? Whatever his name is, Puffy. Him. We also see this same Moon-Mars, or rather Venus-Mars hard aspect within the chart of P. Diddy. And once again, it wasn't something I necessarily was looking for, but I recalls that my darling friend, Faith McInerney, said to me once that in her assessing the charts of serial killers, not serial killers, in her assessing the charts of school shooters, she has found that every school shooter whose chart she's ever assessed has also had the hard aspect combination of Venus and Mars within their charts. Now, you must forgive us as Uranian astrologers, because when we say the hard aspect combination of Venus and Mars, what we're referring to is a broader system of hard aspects than what you might possibly be considering. So I'm also considering the 45-degree semi-square and the 135-degree sesquiquadrate. I'm also considering aspects by declination, because declination and aspects by declination are some of the most important aspects that could possibly exist within a person's natal chart. I'm also considering aspects that are divisible by the number 22.5. Why? Because 22.5 is a half of 45 degrees, and it is also a part of a larger hard aspect family. So when I say that they have these hard aspects within their chart, and you go and look at their chart and say, oh, I don't see a square, a conjunction, or an opposition, I'm not just speaking about the conjunction, the square, or an opposition. I'm referring to a much larger suite of hard aspects, because we need a much larger suite of hard aspects, especially when we're going to root the majority of our delineative process based on hard aspects only, which is what we do within both cosmobiology as well as Uranian astrology. So when we do come back for part 3 of this, in which we're going to assess his chart from a cosmobiological perspective, then we're going to see other combinations coming up to the forefront. If you love the astrology that you see here on the Oraculos podcast, and you want to dive into the lab where we are practicing not only this astrology, but also the magical tools that have made me who I am today, then by all means join us in Michael's Cosmic Conservatory. In Michael's Cosmic Conservatory, I teach you everything that is within me, not just about astrology, but also about the magical practices such as the Kabbalistic Tarot, geomancy, and other forms of astral divination, so that you can increase not only your astrological knowledge, but also so that you can deepen your spiritual connection to this astrology that we know and love. So if this is something that you're interested in, then by all means join us in our members-only space, Michael's Cosmic Conservatory, and dive into the magic that we share there each and every month. Now, we have this understanding of his father based on the Venus being in a hard aspect relationship with the Mars, and I quickly go through the chart to see if the Venus has any other hard aspects that are going to be noteworthy. And I realized that no, he does not have any other classical hard aspects to this Venus that are going to be noteworthy for us in assessing and understanding his father. Therefore, what is my next recourse in understanding his father? My next thing is to go and take a look at the hard aspects to the sun. He has the sun at 0 degrees of the fixed signs, and I know that 0 degrees of the fixed signs equals 15 degrees of the mutable signs. And that's from the perspective of semi-squares and sesquiquadrates. That's one of the tools that we use within our mind in Uranian astrology and cosmobiology to easily identify semi-squares and sesquiquadrates. 0 degrees of the fixed signs equals 15 degrees of the mutable signs. I'm just going to show you this on the dial so that you can have an idea of what I'm seeing. And actually, to assist us, I will show you this on the dial on SolarFire, so that if you don't have the other leading Uranian astrology software that we use, you can at least have a context for what this looks like on SolarFire or within the context of this same one software. If I change this to the 90-degree dial, for example, and I put the pointer on his sun, we would see that on the 90-degree dial, his sun is exactly opposite his Mars and his Venus. And so we'll talk about both of them. So we'll see that his sun is opposite his Mars. Now, what does being opposite something on a dial that only has 90 degrees means? What it means is that his sun is in a 45-degree relationship with that Mars. You're looking on the screen and you might say, well, this looks like a circle, but it's not a circle. It is a dial that only has 90 degrees. Therefore, a half of this circle is not going to be 180. A half of this circle is going to be 45. Therefore, he has his sun and Mars in a semi-square relationship. This is something that we could do by using a structure such as a dial, but it's also something that we could just do in our brain, which is what I teach my students at the Oraculos School of Astrology, how to find and identify these aspect combinations easily within their own mind. So we have Sun-Mars. Sun-Mars is a combination for the macho man. Sun-Mars is the combination for the machoist of men. Sun-Mars is a combination that says to us that once again, his father was a Martian person. So everything that we said about his father via the combination of L4 in a conjunction with Mars, we could say it about his father via the sun in a semi-square relationship with Mars, the militaristic father, the angry father, the father who doesn't know how to control his temper, the the father who's ruling the entire household from a place of anger and a place of superiority and a place of fear. All of these could be the things that he would have inherited from his father. And all of these could have been the things that he would have seen demonstrated within his household from his father towards other people within his household, particularly towards his mother. Now, within this chart, if we go and assess Jeffrey's maternal story, we may not think that there's much to see. However, one of the places I've been trying to get my students to go to first, and this weekend, one of my students surprised me by going there first. One of my students from Chile, you know who you are, surprised me by going there first. He went to the declination table first. The declination table represents a wealth of information within anybody's birth chart, and the fact that declination is out of vogue in the year 2026 is diabolical, because declination as a concept being out of vogue within the year 2026 is akin to conjunctions being out of style in 2026 because nobody can be bothered to find them. It's stupid, is what it is. Declination and aspects that we have by declination will represent concrete events within our lives, period. We are accustomed to only looking at aspects between planets from a zodiacal perspective. But as a professional vanguard of astrologers, we need to start looking at aspects that don't only exist within this wonderful wheel, but we also need to start looking at aspects that exist within a more wider framework of astrological relationships. And declination is not a zodiacal consideration, but it is an extraordinarily important consideration, especially from the perspective of assessing planet-to-planet relationships. So here we see that he has his moon in a contra-parallel relationship with Mars, and the exact degrees of that would be that he has his moon at 6 degrees north declination, 50 minutes, and he has his Mars at 7 degrees south declination, 42 minutes. We typically give about a degree to a degree and a half as far as parallels and contra-parallels are concerned. So he most definitely has Moon Mars as a combination within his chart. Now, you would look at his natal chart and say, well, hell, there's no relationship between that Moon and Mars at all from a traditional astrological perspective. And that is exactly the truth, which is a part of why most traditional astrologers would never even know that he has a Moon Mars story going on within his charts at all, because no one is looking at declination in 2026. And this is the point at which people rail against me and they say, oh, you're just doing that modern astrology stuff. There's nothing modern about declination. Declination is a vital part of how the ancients viewed their sky, because when two planets are together zodiacally within the sky, that doesn't necessarily mean that those two planets are together visibly within the outside sky. But when two planets are together by declination, if you go outside and you look up, you will see those two planets actually standing side by side next to each other. The ancients, operating from a more visual perspective, use these tools to understand the world in which we live. So declination represents one of the oldest forms of assessing planetary relationships within traditional astrology. There's nothing modern about it. So he has Moon Mars by declination. Moon Mars is a very interesting combination, particularly as far as women are concerned, because very often Moon Mars can denote domestic violence against women within our lives, or bearing witness to domestic violence against women within our home. Now, I wrote about this once again on page 637 of my book, The New Western Medical Astrology, Pathways Towards the Cosmos and Dwelling. And what I wrote about the Moon Mars was that Moon Mars denotes a fiery mother. The native's mother may have been angry, aggressive, and extremely independent. In the charts of women, this combination denotes that the mother's independence set the tone for how the native should conduct herself in the world. The native may herself have grown to become a very fiery, action-oriented woman, one who may have a competitive nature. She may gravitate towards extreme sports or constant physical activity. Within the charts of men, this combination can suggest that the native's mother, sisters, and other female family members represented power and intimidation in the native's life. This may have had the effect of emasculating the native as a young boy. And if he is a heterosexual, he may gravitate towards this sort of woman as a marital partner. Moon Mars can also signify domestic violence against women in the early childhood home. So we've already come to the conclusion that his father was a violent person, that his father was a militant person who led his house in a militaristic way. And now we're seeing evidence not only that his mother may have been the same way, a very angry person, a very aggressive person, a very easily irritated person, but that his mother may have been a recipient of violence at the hand of his father within his lifetime. Now, we remember that this person, Jeffrey Epstein, is a Neptunian person. He has no internal sense of direction. He did not come into this world with an internal compass as to who he should be as an individual. So at best, the person who he can possibly become is going to be a person who is mirroring everything that he sees within his environment. So for him, if he sees his father being a very militant person, being a very angry person, being a very abusive person, being somebody who glories in the downfall of others, that too can be something that we find manifesting as a central part of Jeffrey's own orientation to life. If we see his father as a Sun-Mars person, somebody who's very competitive, somebody who always has to win, somebody who always has to make sure that he has the upper hand, then we can see how this would manifest within Jeffrey Epstein's life. And this is true about the Sun-Mars as a combination in general. Now, his father also has Sun-Venus, because the Venus is also in basically a semi-square relationship with that sun. We give semi-squares a 1-degree orb. What is Sun-Venus? Sun-Venus is a very physically attractive man. And even the man who is not physically attractive has the ability to ooze some psychic goo within the world around him that allows the world around him to fall in love with who he is as a person. So you may not think that Jeffrey Epstein was physically attractive. And the reason why I'm going back to speaking about Jeffrey Epstein via this sun is because in the chart of a man, the sun will stand as a proxy for both his father as well as for himself. Similarly, within the chart of a woman, the moon is going to stand as a proxy for both her mother as well as for himself. And therefore, Jeffrey Epstein's father was an angry, militant, very tactical man ready to go at war or to war on the drop of a dime, and so was Jeffrey. But similarly, Jeffrey Epstein's father was a Venusian man, a man who the world probably fell in love with, a man who, despite all of his abuses wrought against others, was able to make those people come back to him as if he were not actually their abuser. And similarly, Jeffrey Epstein may have held within himself that same sort of magnetism, essentially. We wrote about this in our class this weekend. And here are some of the things I wrote about this combination of Venus, Sun, and then Venus, Mars. The native being Jeffrey Epstein, appreciates art and beauty and things of an opulent nature. He may also be drawn to beauty in all its forms, including women. He is a man drawn to pleasure and luxury. He may be very indulgent and may choose to prioritize his own pleasures over those of others. The native may also be a physically attractive human being who, even if he wasn't wildly handsome, still exudes a honey-like aura like that of a Venus flytrap that was able to persuade people to conform to his desires. And we need to remember that when a man has his sun in hard aspect with the planet, the sun takes on the full embodiment or the spirit of that planet. Thus, for many people, Jeffrey Epstein may have been the walking embodiment of Aphrodite, the luxury, the opulence, the feeding, the parties. One of the things that I've noticed is that every single person who gets interviewed about their involvement with Jeffrey Epstein says, oh, we had lunch on the island. There was a lot of lunch and a lot of feeding and a lot of parties going on that island because every single person and their grandmother was having lunch on Epstein Island. There was even one politician who said, I went to the island to have lunch with me and my child's son. And when I left the island, me, my wife, and my child's son all left together, as if he specifically had to mention the fact that his child's son did not stay behind on Epstein Island without his attendance. So for a lot of people, Jeffrey Epstein may have been the walking embodiment of Aphrodite, the luxury, the opulence, the feeding, the parties, the taking care of others, all of it. Jeffrey Epstein may have been no less than Mother Nature herself. Now, finally, we have what is going on from the perspective of the Venus-Mars. And I wrote that this can denote that the native is a very sexual person. He may have a high sex drive. He may also be very creative and artistic. And very often, people who engage in love-related crime or love-related murder also have this combination. So I think it's interesting that with Epstein, we find this combination of Venus-Mars that we also do find within the charts of serial killers. And there's a lot of discussion and debate going on at the moment as to whether or not human trafficking is the only thing that Epstein was responsible, and if he was not also at the core of a very diabolical system of ritualistic murder as well. It has been pointed out to me by Faith McInerney, of course, that Venus-Mars very often shows up within the charts of school shooters, and these people can be very physically passionate in their desire for love and sexual connection. Venus-Mars means a burning desire for love. However, this is also a combination that can lead to violence or warfare in love as being a part of the native's romantic terrain. And then finally, in speaking about Sun-Mars, I say that this can indicate that the native is a very driven and passionate person. He is very masculine. He may also be a very competitive person and have the quality of wanting to win at all costs. Mars also represents the nefesh, or the animal portion of the human soul. Mars governs our base survival instincts and needs. Under the domain of Mars is the constant fear of killing or being killed, raping or being raped, plundering or being plundered, pillaging or being pillaged. For the person who is expressing the most malefic elements of Mars, they take glory in knowing that they can kill, rape, plunder, and pillage everyone around them because this is the source from which they derive their own sense of personal power. And when we compare Mars to Venus, we find that Mars represents all that is crude and unrefined about our human drives, whereas Venus represents a culturing of our basic human desires. And there's more here as well. So these are some of the things that we see manifesting within the chart of Jeffrey Epstein, particularly from the paternal part of his lineage. And as we draw this session today to a close, we also note that we've spoken a lot about the father, but we haven't really spoken about the mother within this. So let's go and quickly take a look at the mother, because very often the container within which we understand how a person viewed their mother within their lives also lays the context and the groundwork for how they interact with women. So within Jeffrey Epstein's chart, we see that he has Moon in a square relationship with Chiron. As many of you know, I was never a lover of Chiron within astrology. I thought it was the stupidest thing in the world, and I thought that all of us were going to hell in a handbasket who were talking about Chiron, because how do we even know what this Chiron thing represents? I thought it was so dumb. And then one day, I was giving a reading to somebody, and Chiron was already on the screen, because I think in the class before that, I was explaining to my students how stupid I thought Chiron was. And Chiron was still on the screen, and everything else within that person's chart said they had a wonderful relationship with their mother. And so I read the chart as, you have a wonderful relationship with your mother. And the person said, no, my mother was the worst person in the world. My mother was physically and mentally abusive. My mother hated me. And the only thing on the screen that stood out was the fact that that person had their moon in an exact conjunction with Chiron. Then the next person came to me with Moon Chiron and said the same thing. Then the next person, then the next person. And so I did what I often do with the universe. I said, universe, if this is something that you want me to pay attention to, please send me a bunch of people who have this so that I can feel convicted about what I say to people about this. And so said, so done. Person after person after person started banging on my door with Moon Chiron, and their stories were all the same. My mother hated me. My mother didn't want children. My mother wanted a boy but had a girl. My mother really just wanted a pet but had a child. My mother committed suicide. My mother locked herself in the bedroom and said she would commit suicide. My mother tied me to the burning hot pipes in the middle of winter, and as an adult told me that I made it all up and she never did it. My mother, my mother, my mother. All of these harrowing stories regarding the mother. My mother never breastfed me when I was a child. I was my mother's therapist because my mother and my father divorced when I was very young. And so from the age of 6 years old, I was my mother's therapist for her entire life. My mother, my mother, my mother. And so today, Mon Chiron is the hill upon which I'm willing to die for because I've done the work of studying what Mon Chiron means. And I emphatically am sure that I know 90% of what Mon Chiron will indicate within the chart of a person. Because if it doesn't manifest within the maternal fashion, the only other space within our lives it has to manifest is within the context of our digestive health, which is something that I also wrote about in my green book, The New Western Medical Astrology. So Jeffrey Epstein has Mon Chiron, which means that at best, he had a relationship with his mother where the two of them just didn't see eye to eye. At worst, he had a relationship with his mother that represents the greatest wound that anybody could ever possibly hope to have within a lifetime. That's Mon Chiron. He also has Mon in a square relationship with Uranus. Mon Uranus is something that we oftentimes see within the charts of women who enjoy their freedom as being a human being and don't necessarily care for resonating deeply with their identity as a woman. Or even if they're quite fine within their female identity, they don't really want to be your mom, and they don't really want to be a sister, and they don't really want to be a girl pal because they don't want to manifest womanhood within the world in a stereotypical way. And so very often when a person has Mon Uranus within their chart, they find themselves in a situation where their mom didn't really want to be a mom. Their mom didn't really want to have children, or their mom was just ill-suited for the job because their mom represented a source of volatility within their lives, and she just wasn't cut out for the role of motherhood. Now, as I say these things as standalone astrological factors, we should bear in mind that what? We should bear in mind that there is no full delineation of a chart just based on one astrological combination. So whenever I say what an astrological combination means, I always follow it up by saying within a chart that denotes the same, or within a chart that also points in that same direction. So please, if I've said something and you have it in your chart and you say, oh, my mom wasn't that way, or oh, this is BS, this doesn't apply to me, please don't call me, beat me. If you want to reach me, if you want to page me, don't. Because the reality is, I always say within a chart that otherwise denotes the same. He has a chart that denotes the same. If it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck and smells like a duck, it surely is a duck. He has Mon Chiron affliction, Mon Uranus affliction, which can say to us that his mother did not have the tools necessary to stand in the role of motherhood within this lifetime. And therefore, his understanding of what it means to be with a woman is based on the volatility of what he saw within his early childhood environment, not only in just who his mother was, but also in terms of who his father was in relation to that mother. Now, it is curious that this moon is also the specific significator of his 7th house, which means that within the chart of Jeffrey Epstein, the moon is also going to represent his romantic partners within this lifetime, and he is having Moon in a square relationship with Uranus, which means that even the romantic partners he finds himself attracted to carry the same seed memory of the mother who was volatile, of the mother who didn't want me, of the mother who was here today and gone today, of the mother who did not have the tools or the resources to settle me as a man or to settle me as a boy and give me a sense of meaning and purpose. So as I looked towards my mother for meaning and purpose, all I saw was more volatility. And therefore, in my relationship with women, all I can muster within myself is volatility and boredom and quickly needing to change the scenery as far as the women within my life are concerned, because I look at one and then I get tired, and I look at another one and then I get tired. So I quickly need to be in a constant state of doing things with the women within my life that keeps me stimulated, because I get bored very easily because I came from a household of volatility. And as a result of that, it's going to take a lot more to give me an erection than just your normal one-time stand. And the things that I might have to do in order to really find myself fully stimulated might be things that other people might consider to be bizarre. But those things for me represent how I connect with my own sense of intimacy, regardless of how bizarre they may look to you. Now, he has also within this chart the combination of the moon in a... Why is there a moon Neptune in my brain? There's moon Neptune in my brain, not because it's in the chart, but because it's on the declination table. You see why we have to look at the declination table? He has moon Neptune. Moon Neptune means my mother was a disappointment. My mother was sick. My mother wasn't able to show up to be a mother regardless of how much she wanted to be a mother. My mother just didn't have the tools or the means necessary to be a mother for me. I saw my mother as a weak woman. And on top of me seeing my mother as a weak woman, I also saw my mother as an abused woman because I also have Moon Mars within my chart. So my mother was a weak woman, but she also was an abused woman. And I already know that my father was a Martian person who was the hand that wrought this abuse on my family and who was also the hand that wrought this abuse upon my mother. Therefore, when I see my mother being the weak, abused woman, the weak, abused, unstable woman who she is, maybe there's a part of me that is disgusted within her. And maybe my disgust for the weakness in my mother is also a mirror of the disgust for the weakness within myself. Because remember, I'm a Saturn-Neptune person. I don't know whether I'm staying or whether I'm going. I don't know what my sense of direction is within my lifetime. And when I look at my father, I see a robust man who knows what he's doing in the world. He is the head of the military. But when I look at my mother, I see reflects within my mother the same weakness that I see reflects within myself. And therefore, I hate her guts. And fortunately for me, the hatred is mutual because I have Moon Chiron. She hates my guts too. We are in a mutual relationship of perfect hatred. So as I take that out of myself into the world, and as I take that out of myself into now forming and forging relationships with women, truly, what I see when I look at a woman is someone that's weak. What I see when I look at a woman is someone who should be taken advantage of. What I see when I look at a woman is somebody who is representing for me possibly a reflection of the weakness that I've seen within myself, and I hate that part of me, which is why I've leaned so much in my adulthood into the fiery Martian part of who I am, because when I look at the Neptunian part of who I am, I just feel sad about life all over again. I just feel depressed about life all over again. And truthfully, in a world where I have the option to be Neptune or I have the option to be Mars, give me Mars any day, because at least Mars can keep on going. If I stay within the Neptune part of myself, I'll be frozen, I'll die, I will dissolve into a pool of nothingness. And that's not who I'm trying to be as a man. I'm trying to be like who my father was. And so as a result of that, what ends up happening for him is he sees women as an object that represents something for him to reflect his own thoughts upon, or something for him to project his own thoughts on, because remember, Neptune will reflect anything you put on it. And he has the moon with the Neptune. So women within his life are only meant to reflect whatever he's projecting onto them. And what he's projecting onto them is the image of a weak mother who doesn't have the tools to actually show up and be supportive in any way, shape, or form whatsoever. And therefore, it is his job to continue to facilitate an environment in which he continues that narrative of women are weak and disposable, women are weak and dependable, women are weak and susceptible, women are just weak in general. I do not see women as women. I do not see women for who they are. I see women as a reflection of something within my mind that registers with the words weakness and abused. And so maybe I feel as if I'm just fulfilling my human duty by carrying that out, because anything that I've ever known about how to interact with a woman has been through abuse and exploitation of her weakness. Therefore, am I really such a bad person if I'm just doing to women what is meant to be done with them based on my warped version of reality and my warped and confusing version of my childhood? Becomes the question. Now, in concluding this, we see by declination that he's also having his ascendant in a contraparallel relationship with Pluto and a contraparallel relationship with Uranus. Uranus ascendant is something that we oftentimes find within the chart of three conditions. One, your parents worked for the military, and as a result of that, you had to keep on moving around, which was the case with him, which I always knew even before I saw his chart. Two, your parents got divorced, and as a result of that, you were volleyed back and forth between the two of them endlessly, and as a result of that, you have no true sense of stability within your life. Or three, you come from a household of immigrant parents or a household of immigrant family, and you were uprooted from your native land at a very early age, and as a result of that, you don't feel a sense of grounding within yourself. Those are the three possibilities that I have found to be consistently true when it comes to the ascendant in any sort of hard aspect relationship with Uranus, including the parallel of declination, which is what we see here. He also has ascendant Pluto. Ascendant Pluto is a combination that we oftentimes find within the charts of people who come from a household environment of trauma. Who come from a household environment of trauma. This is only further corroborated by the fact that he also has his moon in a sesquiquadrate relationship with that same Pluto. If we go to the 90-degree dial, and we put the pointer on the moon, we will find that his moon is opposite the Pluto on the 90-degree dial, which means that the moon is in a relationship with Pluto that is divisible by the number 45. A sesquiquadrate is 135. 135 divided by 45 gives us 3. 3 semi-squares give us the sesquiquadrate. So he has moon Pluto. He comes from a house of a traumatized mother, but also a house of a traumatizing mother. Therefore, what does he do with the women within his life as a means of reclaiming some sense of power in a life where his mother herself may have been a source of his own trauma? He seeks revenge. And whether or not that registers as a conscious decision or not is immaterial, because for him, the only thing that matters is that he is carrying out and fulfilling this part of himself that feels true based on his own life experiences. I'm seeing some Jupiterian things, and this is where we're going to end this. But we see that he has Jupiter midheaven by declination. And when a person has Jupiter midheaven, that says that this person is just lucky. Because the midheaven from a Uranian astrology perspective represents the soul of a person. So he's just lucky. And even people who aren't lucky when they have Jupiter midheaven, they just look lucky. They just look and they talk luck. They talk luck to the point where the world around them thinks that they're really lucky, thinks that there's something really going on for them. And so that is who he was. He looked like the manifestation of Jupiter. Come and have fun with me on my island. Who else can say, come and have fun with me on my island? Not many celebrities. And what was he a celebrity of? The world will never know. But come and have fun with me on my island. Come and hang out with me with the most richest and most influential people within the world. Come and eat jerky with all of us, because jerky is another word that keeps on showing up in those Epstein files. And there's great speculation that this word jerky is actually a reference to human meat. But come and eat jerky with me and the rest of my friends on my island, and come and have the time of your life over here on Epstein Island. He was a Jupiterian person. He looked like the god Bacchus. He looked like the god Jupiter. He looked like Santa Claus for many, many, many people. And within his chart, he also has Jupiter in a square relationship with the nodes. And that means, from a Uranian astrology perspective, that this is somebody who had intimate connections with the rich and the famous, but he also had intimate connections with a very large international social circle of people who represented wealth and influence. And all of these things coming together and gave us the specific person who he ended up being within the world. And all of these factors coming together reflects the truth of his story based on who he became. So, everybody, that is the end of our presentation on this topic for today. I sincerely hope that you learned something from this, or that something about my methodology made sense to you, and that I've left you more confident and not confused based on your own applications of these tools and these skills within your own astrological practice. As you know, all of the delineations for today were derived from my book, The New Western Medical Astrology, Pathways Towards the Cosmos Indwelling. If you have not already picked up a copy of this book, please make sure to do so. And as you all know, the very baseline of everything I teach at the Oraculos School of Astrology is based on this book, Mastering Traditional Astrology, A Depth of Beginning in the Celestial Art. I'm currently working on my 4th and 5th books at the moment, my natal astrology book, as well as my Uranian astrology textbook. And they're both set to be published this year, hopefully before the next massive astrology conference. And so please stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, we do have my chapter on navigating your financial destiny completely finished and completely edited. And I believe in this current administration, in this current economy, there's nothing that will be more useful to us than understanding how to navigate our financial destiny. So if you want to receive that as a free gift to you, from me to you, as a token of my appreciation, then please do go over to Amazon.com and leave us an honest review about how these books have impacted your astrological practice. Any review that you leave will support me. I'm a self-published author, and I've told this story many times about how I could have gone down many routes as an author, and I would have been very sad had I published with other people. And I'm so grateful that I published these books myself, because I'm able to live off of these book sales, essentially. But the only way that Amazon supports me as a self-published author is if these books have reviews that are honest and not robot generated. So please, if you want to continue to support me, please leave us a review over on Amazon. Take a screenshot, send it to us at hello@oraculosastrology.com, and we will send you not only my complete write-up of today's podcast episode on this Jeffrey Epstein chart, but we'll also send you my complete chapter on how to navigate your financial destiny, which is going to be released in my next on natal astrology. Thank you all so much. I love you so much. Thank you for being here. It really means the world to me that so many of you would gather here with us today. We are going to come back out with parts 3 and 4 of this series, looking at his chart through the lens of cosmobiology and Uranian astrology as a part of our overall true crime astrology series. And then after that, we have a major lineup of people quite similar to him who are going to look at through the lens of traditional astrology. So please make sure to stay tuned. Please make sure to take 2 seconds, go down below and subscribe to the Oraculos podcast here on YouTube or wherever you find us on the internet, and hit the notification bell so that you can continue to receive notification when we come out with these episodes each and every week. From the bottom of my heart, I love you sincerely. Be well and have a great rest of your day. Bye.